What's going on, everybody? TL Branson here, and it's time for another YA Fantasy Addicts book review. Today, we're going to be talking about Sky in the Deep. This book first popped up on my TBR in 2018, and I just now got around to reading it. What made you read it now, you say? I read it with my book club on Patreon. If you didn't know, YA Fantasy Addicts started a Patreon, and Tier 3 of that Patreon is an exclusive book club group. So with our Tier 3 members, we read Sky in the Deep, and I tell you what, the book club made it so much more fun than just reading it by yourself. In fact, this book, all by itself, is probably just kind of average. But with the book club, because we were discussing at key points along the way, it made it really fun and engaging. So, what is Sky in the Deep about? Well, Sky in the Deep was written by Adrienne Young and was her debut novel at the time. She's since written 3 published novels, and very shortly her 4th novel, Namesake, will be publishing. In fact, for the YA Fantasy Addicts Patreon book club, we're reading Fable next. Why didn't we continue on with a book, say, like A Girl Deceived gave back? Well, because Sky in the Deep really wasn't all that super engaging. We enjoyed the book, but let's talk about that a little later. First, Sky in the Deep follows the main character, and I'm probably going to butcher these names. I'm sorry. I'm just letting you know up front. I'm going to butcher these. The main character's name is Elin. Now, Elin is a Viking, and she's youngish. I don't know what her exact age is, but the Vikings, or rather Elin'S tribe, the Aska, have been at war with the Ricky tribe for centuries. I mean, hundreds of years they've been battling one another. Now, they only battle every 5 years. Every 5 years, they come together, they fight, and then they go back to their villages and they live their own peaceful lives for 5 years. And then 5 years later, they come to the same area to fight all over again, and so on and so forth. Elin is out there fighting in the opening scenes of the book, and she's about to be killed by this Ricky. And out of nowhere, this ball of hair, and that's literally how the book describes it, comes out of nowhere and tackles her opponent. And she immediately recognizes it's her brother, Eerie. There's only one problem. Eerie is dead. He died 5 years ago in the previous battle. And Elin and Eerie were like shield brother and sister, or whatever you want to call it. They were fighting together. They were a pair watching each other's back. And Eerie died in that battle, and here he is saving her. Now, she goes back to her dad and says, "Dad, I saw Eerie," and they're like, "Oh, his ghost came out and saved you. You have been blessed by Sigurd," and Sigurd is their god. Any of you who play Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you might be thinking of Sigurd, which is Eivor's brother. No, not Sigurd, Sigurd. Very, very similar, both Viking things, but anyway. Elin then doesn't believe that it was just a ghost, so she goes out and she tries to find him, and as the Ricky are leaving, she spots Eerie and she tails him, and she ends up being taken prisoner. Now, the first 20% of the book is kind of frustrating, because you want her and Eerie to have this little reunion, like, "It's been forever since I've seen you. Oh, what happened?" But Eerie won't talk to her. For chapters and chapters, he tries to not talk to her, and it's kind of frustrating. And there's a reason for that. I'm not sure if I buy the reason per se, but it's okay. It's a decent enough explanation. And for the rest of the book, Elin lives in the tribe, or in the town of the Ricky tribe, as a prisoner. And if you read the back of the book, you'll instantly be able to tell that Eerie's friend Fisk, or his brother rather, the person who has become his brother in the Ricky tribe, is Elin's love interest for the book. So you can kind of see where that's going to go with them developing a relationship over the course of the book. Well, let's start off with what I wasn't really a big fan of. First off, I would say the first half of the book or more didn't really have a plot. I didn't know where it was going half the time. I was interested in what the story was doing because I wanted to see Elin and Erie have their, their conversation together, and then I wanted to see, what continued to proceed from there. But there wasn't a driving enemy or force or plot other than that Elin is a prisoner, but she's not really a prisoner because the people that are taking her prisoner are actually kind of nice to her, and really I would say that's more the driving plot of the book. You've got the Ricky and the Aska that have been against each other for years, all because of some blood feud going back centuries between two gods, and Elin always looked at the Rickies as some kind of monster, and the Ricky always looked at the Askas as some kind of monsters. So here now we have the two of them beginning to realize that they're just like each other. They're just people. They're the same people. They're not even different people, except for they have slightly different gods. That, I would say, is probably what drives this book. Now, about 50 to 60% of the way through the book, an enemy actually does appear, and I wish that the enemy would have been foreshadowed a little bit better than they are. They are mentioned, I should say that, okay? Elin explains different things about what happened to her mother, but to me, personally, they feel like this out there sort of thing. They didn't feel to me like they were a present enemy. And then all of a sudden, bam! They appear, and now we have an enemy. But it takes till about the 50-60% mark to get to that point. Then, somewhere around the 70% mark of the book, the pace of this book just like steps on fast forward 3 or 4 times. On TV, you can get the 4 little arrows for fast forward, and it's just going... That's exactly how this book felt at about the 70% mark. Good pacing all the way up to 70%, and then bam, let's put our foot on the gas, and the last 30% of the book really could have been its own book. Quite honestly, it should have been its own book. I would have loved to seen that played out. To give you a prime example of what I'm talking about, the big battle, the biggest fight scene that this book has to offer is done in a chapter and a half. 1.5 chapters, maybe not even that. Maybe it's 1.25 chapters. Something like that. Ridiculously short. The final battle is done and over. And these chapters are not long, mind you. These chapters are like 8 pages long. That's a chapter, and the whole big battle, boom, gone. Now, what did I like about this book? The characters are super engaging. I loved Elin. I loved the battle that she went through. I would say that Fisk's younger brother, Halvard, my favorite character in the whole book, which is actually, what did I do with that other book? Oh, here it is. The Halvard apparently is a character in this book. Now, this is part of the same duology, but they are 2 separate books. Sky in the Deep is a standalone. A Girl the Sea Gave Back is a standalone. They're 2 separate stories. However, they're in the same world. So Halvard is in this book, but nobody else, from what I understand. I haven't read it, so I can't tell you that for certain. But one of the people in the book group with me did mention that she saw that Halvard was in this book. Now, I love Halvard. Halvard is Fisk's younger brother, and you can tell he's innocent. You can tell he doesn't have the same knowledge of everything that's going on that Elin and the others do. And he sees Elin and he immediately attaches onto her, and he wants to follow her around and ask all sorts of questions. And he's innocent, he's loving, he's caring. You can't help but love Halvard. And then there's Inky, I don't know how you pronounce it. That's Fisk's and Alvard's mother. Now, she's been taking care of Erie for the last 5 years. Erie was near death when they found him. In fact, Fisk was near death as well. They were right next to each other. They almost killed each other. They were the ones that hurt each other. They fell into a ravine, and Inky finds, and brings him back to health. So Inky has been like a mother to Erie this whole time. And Inky is a great character. I really like her. She's a great motherly character. She's a healer. And I really can't say much more about Inky because you just need to read the book to fully appreciate her. There are other characters. There are antagonistic characters who don't think that Elin should be in the Ricky tribe, and then there are people who are more pensive, like the Tala, which is kind of a honorific title, and she's very observant, and you see her a lot, and she talks about prophecies and all those sorts of things. And there are characters like that, supporting characters, minor characters, but the cast that really takes the show are Elin, Eerie, Fisk, Halvard, and Inga for sure. I love how they continue to grow, how Elin begins to have an appreciation for the Ricky and what that means for the future of their tribes. The battle scenes are good. I mean, they're short, but they're good. Adrienne Young, at least in this book, is really gory or really aggressive. She always talks about killing people and wanting to rip their guts out and that sort of thing. And I kind of like that personally. It reminds me of like a tame George R.R. Martin. There's no cursing going on in here. There's no sexual scenes or anything like that. I mean, really almost middle grade. In fact, one of the readers in our book group said she felt this book was more middle grade than it was YA. The pacing, the simplistic language. It's a really good book. I'd recommend you read it, but just be aware the pacing is kind of fast, especially towards the end. And earlier on, there feels like there's not much plot. It definitely feels like a debut. It's a good debut. I've read some bad debuts, but this is a good debut. It's taken me 3 years to read it. But now I'm hopping on to Fable next. Fable will be the next book that we read in our book club. And after that, I have an arc of Namesake that I need to read before it publishes in March. So that's my agenda coming up here soon, to read Fable and Namesake. I really enjoyed Sky in the Deep. If you haven't read it, you should give it a shot too. Thank you so much to all of our patrons on Patreon for making the book group possible, making everything else, the giveaways that we've done, and I've got a couple more ready to go. I have All the Tides of Fate, signed edition, and we have a Sky Beyond the Storm, also signed. We have these books waiting in the wings to be given away shortly. The more supporters we have, the more giveaways we can do, the more content, the more time I'll have for YouTube videos and all sorts of things. Really cool stuff headed your way. Hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you again next time.